I never thought the person trying to save my life would be a stranger, and the person trying to end it would be my own blood. It was a Tuesday morning when my daughter-in-law called me. Her voice was warm, almost too warm. The kind of warm that a person uses when they want something from you. She said my son had been planning a special birthday trip for me. A surprise. The two of them wanted to take me to see the Grand Canyon. My son Marcus had booked everything, she said. All I had to do was pack a bag and show up at the airport Friday morning. I remember standing at my kitchen window after I hung up, looking out at the oak tree my wife Dorothy had planted in the backyard 22 years ago. Dorothy passed 4 years ago this March. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis. I think about her every single day, but I think about her most when something feels wrong and I can't explain why. Something felt wrong. I told myself I was being foolish. Marcus was my son, my only child. He had grown up in that house, climbed that oak tree, broken his arm, falling out of it when he was 9 years old. I had sat with him in the emergency room for 4 hours, holding his good hand while they set the bone. Whatever distance had grown between us in recent years, he was still my son. And maybe this trip was his way of closing that distance. I packed my bag. Friday morning, I drove myself to the airport. Marcus and his wife Renee were already there at the departures entrance when I pulled up. Marcus looked good, fit, well-dressed, the kind of look that came with the consulting firm job he had landed 3 years back. Renee was smiling beside him, her hand through his arm. She kissed me on the cheek and said I looked wonderful. My son hugged me, and for just a moment I let myself believe everything was fine. We checked in and made our way through security. The airport was busy for a weekday. All the usual noise and motion of people going somewhere. I had my rolling bag, my jacket folded over my arm, my boarding pass on my phone. We were flying out of Charlotte to Phoenix, where we would rent a car and drive to the canyon. 2 nights, 3 days. Marcus had a hotel booked on the South Rim. We cleared security and found a coffee place near the gate. Renee said she was going to find the restroom, and Marcus offered to get the drinks. He asked me what I wanted, and I said, just a black coffee, same as always. He went to the counter, and I sat down in one of the chairs near the window overlooking the tarmac. That was when it happened. A man sat down beside me, not across from me, but right beside me, close, the way someone sits when they don't want to be overheard. He was wearing a dark jacket and there was a badge on his belt, TSA. He was looking straight ahead at the gate area, not at me, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a murmur. He said, "Sir, I need you to stay calm. Don't look at me. Don't react. I need you to trust me for the next 60 seconds." I felt my whole body go still. He said, "The coffee your son is ordering for you right now, do not drink it. I'm going to need you to stand up in about 30 seconds, walk toward the men's restroom down the corridor to your left, and wait for me inside. If your son asks where you're going, tell him your stomach is bothering you. Can you do that?" I didn't move. I couldn't move. He said very quietly, "Sir, your life depends on you doing exactly what I just asked." I stood up. I don't know how my legs carried me. I walked to the corridor, turned left, pushed open the door to the men's restroom. There were 2 other men inside washing their hands. I stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror, and the man looking back at me looked 63 years old and terrified. The TSA officer came in 2 minutes later. He checked the stalls, waited for the other men to leave, and then he turned to me. He told me his name was Agent Carver. He said he was with a joint federal task force operating out of the airport. He said they had been monitoring activity on my accounts for the past 6 weeks after a tip came in from a bank employee who had noticed a pattern of unusual inquiries, someone running searches on my retirement accounts, my life insurance policy, the beneficiary designations. I said, "What are you telling me?" He said, "Sir, We believe there is a plan in place to poison you during this trip. We've had your son and his wife under surveillance for 19 days. The floor did not come up to meet me. I did not collapse. I stood there and felt something happen behind my eyes that I could not name. Not disbelief exactly, because somewhere underneath everything I had already known. Not consciously, but somewhere. I said, "My son." Agent Carver said yes. He said the substance had already been added to the coffee at the counter. His team had been watching the interaction on camera. He said if I drank what Marcus brought back to that table, I would not make it to Phoenix. I thought about Dorothy. I thought about what she would say if she could see me standing in an airport bathroom, being told that our son had just poisoned my coffee. I thought she would be heartbroken in a way that went beyond words. And then I thought she would tell me to stand up straight and do what the man said. I stood up straight. Agent Carver explained what they needed from me. He said if I disappeared completely right now, Marcus would know something had gone wrong, and they might lose the window to make an arrest. He needed me to go back out there, accept the coffee, and sit with my son for a few more minutes while his team got into position. He said I would not drink the coffee. He said they would move quickly. I said, "You want me to sit down with my son knowing what I now know?" He said, "Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I know what I'm asking. I want to be honest with you about something." In that moment, standing in that bathroom, I was not thinking about justice. I was not thinking about what Marcus deserved or what the law required. I was thinking about the 9-year-old boy with the broken arm. I was thinking about every baseball game and every Christmas morning, and the way he used to fall asleep on the couch with his head on Dorothy's lap. I was thinking about how a person gets from that boy to this moment, and I could not make the distance make sense. I walked back out. Marcus was at the table. He had 3 cups of coffee, one for each of us. Renee had come back from the restroom and was on her phone. My son looked up when he saw me and smiled and said, "There you are, Dad. Thought you got lost." I sat down. He slid the cup across to me. Black coffee, just like I asked. I put my hands around the cup. I said, "Thank you, son." He said, "Of course. You feeling okay? You look a little pale." I said I was fine, just tired from the drive. We sat there together, the 3 of us, and Renee talked about the hotel and the canyon views and some restaurants she had read about online. Marcus asked me about my neighbor, old Pete Greenstaff, and whether he had ever fixed that fence between our yards. I answered his questions. I kept my hands around the cup and never brought it to my lips. I watched my son's face while he talked. I looked for something, some flicker of guilt or hesitation, or the kind of restlessness that people carry when they're doing something they know is wrong. He looked fine. He looked easy. He laughed at something Renee said and shook his head and checked the departure board. That was the hardest part, not the fear, the normalcy. Then I saw Agent Carver at the edge of the gate area. There was another agent beside him and 2 uniformed officers moving in from the far corridor. Marcus had his back to them. Renee saw them first. I watched her face change. She said Marcus's name, very quietly. He turned around. The next few minutes I will not describe in detail because some things do not need to be laid out piece by piece. What I will tell you is that my son did not run. He stood up and his chair scraped back, and he looked at the agents, and then he looked at me. And in that look was everything. The question and the answer both. Whether I had known, whether I had done this to him. And I held his gaze, and I did not look away. They took him aside. Renee was crying, saying she didn't know anything, she had no part in it. That turned out not to be entirely true, but I'll get to that. Agent Carver came and sat across from me at the table. He asked me if I was all right. I told him I didn't know yet. He said that was a fair answer. He told me what they had pieced together over the weeks of surveillance. Marcus had been in serious financial trouble for over a year. Debt from bad investments, a loan he had guaranteed for a business that folded, credit card balances that had gotten out of control. He had looked at my retirement accounts, my life insurance, the house I owned outright, and he had made a calculation. He had not come to me and told me he was struggling. He had not asked me for help. He had decided that the simplest solution was that I should not be here anymore. Renee had known. Not the full plan from the beginning, the investigation would later clarify, but she had known enough and said nothing. That is its own kind of decision. I want to stop here for a moment and say something that might be hard to understand if you haven't lived it. When I sat in that airport chair after the agents walked my son away, I was not angry. I know that sounds impossible, but anger requires a kind of energy that I did not have. What I felt was a grief so complete that it had no edges. It was like standing in a room that had no walls. Dorothy was gone. And now this. And the ground under all of it was the question that has no good answer. Where does a person go wrong? And did I miss it? And could I have done anything differently? I stayed in Charlotte that night. An agent drove me home, and the victim's advocate named Sandra sat with me at my kitchen table for an hour and a half and made sure I was not alone in the initial hours. She was a kind woman. She left me her number and told me to call if I needed anything. I sat in my kitchen long after she left. The oak tree was dark outside the window. I made myself a bowl of soup, and I ate it slowly, and I thought about Marcus at 9 years old, and Marcus at 16, and Marcus at 34 getting married, while Dorothy danced with him in her blue dress. I thought about all the years and all the ordinary days, and then I thought about a cup of coffee I never drank. In the weeks that followed, I learned more than I wanted to know. The financial picture was worse than I had imagined. Marcus owed nearly $400,000 across multiple creditors. He had been fielding calls, avoiding letters, running out of options. He had looked at what I had built over a 40-year career, and he had decided it was the answer. Not a conversation, not humility, not the kind of reaching out that family is supposed to be for. I also learned that he had searched online in some detail for information about undetectable substances and what they did to the body over time. I am not going to describe that in detail. I only mention it because it tells you something about the planning involved. This was not a moment of desperation. This was deliberate. My attorney, a woman named Phyllis who had handled Dorothy's estate, sat with me and walked me through my options and what the legal process would look like. I asked her one question that I think surprised her. I asked whether I could still set up a trust for Marcus's children, my grandchildren, 2 little ones I had always loved without condition, in a way that was fully protected and that neither Marcus nor Renee could ever access. She said yes, we set it up. I want to be clear about something. Forgiving someone is not the same as pretending something did not happen. It is not the same as deciding there should be no consequences. I have spent a long time in my life confusing those two things, and if I am being honest, I think part of how we got here is that I spent too many years smoothing things over with Marcus rather than being direct. When he made bad decisions, I fixed the immediate problem without requiring him to sit with it. When he borrowed money and didn't pay it back, I called it a gift and moved on. When he stopped showing up for holidays, I told myself he was busy. I told myself he was his own person and I should not push. Maybe that is where things went wrong. I do not know. I probably will never fully know. What I do know is that the last thing Dorothy ever said to me in the hospital, 2 days before she died, was that she was worried about Marcus. She said she thought we had loved him too softly. She said she hoped he would find his way. She reached over and took my hand and said, "Walter, don't let him lose himself." I have thought about those words every day since she said them. I am still thinking about them now. Marcus pled guilty. The sentencing was 8 months after the arrest, and I sat in the courtroom in a gray suit and I looked at my son at the defense table, and he looked older than I had ever seen him, hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with age. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he turned and looked at me. He said, "Dad, I don't have words for what I did. I know that sorry doesn't cover it. I just want you to know that I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway, and I have to live with that. I'm sorry, Dad." I did not stand up. I did not make a statement. That was my choice, and I stand by it. I had said what I needed to say to him in private, in the visiting room 3 weeks before, when it was just the two of us, and a table between us and no cameras. What I told him then, I will keep between us. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse and stood on the steps in the afternoon sun. My neighbor Pete Greenstaff was there. He had driven me because I had asked him to, because I did not want to be alone in a car with my thoughts on that particular day. Pete is 71 years old and has known me for 26 years, and he didn't say a single word. He just stood next to me on those courthouse steps and let the afternoon go by. After a while I said, "Let's go get some lunch." He said, "I know a place." We drove across town and ate at a diner he liked, and I had a burger, and he had the meatloaf, and we talked about the fence. He had finally fixed it, using some cedar planks he'd found on sale, and about the weather coming in from the west, and about a book we had both been reading. We talked about everything except what had just happened. And that was exactly right. I want to tell you what I've learned from all of this, because I think it matters. I learned that love is not the same as trust, and trust has to be built on something real. I loved my son without condition, that was right. But I extended him trust he had not demonstrated he deserved over and over, because it was easier than the alternative. That was not love. That was avoidance dressed up as grace. I learned that strangers will sometimes do for you what family will not. Agent Carver did not know me. He owed me nothing. He saw something wrong and he did something about it at some personal risk to the operation he was running. That kind of integrity does not announce itself. It just acts. I learned that grief and anger are not the same thing and should not be forced into the same container. I have grieved my son in a way that has no name in any language I know. I have not stopped loving him. But love does not require me to minimize what he chose to do or to pretend the damage is not real. And I learned, this one I am still learning, that the life you have left is worth building, not just maintaining, building. I am 63 years old. I have a house and an oak tree and a neighbor who finds good diners, and 2 grandchildren I intend to know very well as they grow up. I have mornings and afternoons, and the kind of quiet that is not emptiness but space. Dorothy would tell me to use it. So that is what I'm going to do. If you are listening to this and something in your own life feels the way mine felt on that Tuesday when my daughter-in-law called with her too warm voice, if something is wrong and you can't quite name it, please listen to that feeling. I am not saying that everyone around you means you harm. Most people do not. But I am saying that instinct is not paranoia. Your body knows things before your mind does. And there are people in this world, strangers sometimes, neighbors sometimes, quiet professionals doing their job on an ordinary Tuesday morning, who will reach out a hand if you are willing to take it. Don't be too proud to take the hand. That is all I have for you today. I appreciate you spending this time with me. You can leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and look out for each other.